Welcome back to Comfort Breeds Complacency. This is episode 16. Today we're joined with one of my idols who I've followed for a while, Chase Reinford, otherwise known as Adrenaline Addiction on YouTube. He is a bass jumper, professional bass jumper. He's a content creator, and he's the owner of Exile BASE, canopy company. So thanks for coming on, brother.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I was saying before we lost there for some Wi-Fi issues, but I was saying how it's cool in the sport of bass. I've had Miles Dashier on here before, and it's cool how you can talk to people who have been idols and are like highest in the game, whereas in other sports you can't really get the opportunity to talk to people like that. So it's always been an honor watching your videos, and finally getting to meet you is really cool. So yeah, it's been a cool journey watching you from the cliff jumping days to where you're at now. So yeah, thanks for coming on.
Sick. And to take on your point there, like, yeah, the community in base jumping is so tiny that it's like, even for me, like with Dukes and those guys, watching them growing up and then meeting them and like doing jumps with them in the future, it's like really, really cool how base is like that. Like you said, other sports can't just rock up to a football game and like meet Peyton Manning, hang out with them for the day. But with base, that's how it goes. And everybody's like super tight knit, super chill, super down to earth. And I love it.
Hell yeah, it's a really cool community. Yeah, that was one of the coolest parts since I've gotten into it that I've realized. But I'm sure everybody who's watching this will know who you are. But did you kind of want to give a brief rundown from kind of your early days with YouTube up to where you're at now? I know you were talking about you had your pilot's license and things like that. So kind of just how you start out in the cliff jumping to where you're at now.
Yeah. I'll start all over since we cut out there for a bit. But essentially, I mean, I've been jumping off things since I was little, like jumping off my parents' house, the roof of the shed onto the trampoline. And I was like on the trampoline every single day. But then that kind of translated into like motocross, snowboarding. I pursued snowboarding. I was trying to become a professional snowboarder. I only ever made it to like the semi-professional slope style competitions. And I was doing that for a few years when I had a really serious accident, and that really ended that dream. And at the time I was like, I need to go and, be an adult. So I went to flight school. I got all my pilot licenses and ratings, commercial license. And at the same time, I started like cliff jumping more, like hanging out with friends and just kind of like pushing my own limits and seeing how far and how high I could take cliff jumping. And at that point, I was filming stuff, just making like casual little videos. And I guess it all kind of changed when I did like the 112-foot triple gainer at the Vermont quarry. That video like blew up online. And then at that point I was like, I'm just going to keep filming this stuff and seeing what happens. And then kind of took off on YouTube. And from there, I bailed on the flying stuff. Obviously I turned down a really sick job offer out of flight school and then moved to Hawaii, just cliff jumping full time, doing the YouTube thing. And that just evolved into base jumping eventually, just because, you can only go so high with the cliff diving into water before you're, going to get seriously hurt. And it just takes such a toll on your body. My back and my body's still like messed up from all those really big jumps I was doing into water. So then it just, evolved into base, and now base is my life.
Awesome. Yeah. It was cool watching that whole journey. My friends and I, we'd have this big old shitty TV in our like boys' house that we'd throw your videos on each week when they'd come out, and we'd all gather around and watch them. And I remember actually being in like some of my university classes watching your videos, and you got the school bus, and I always wanted to do like a school bus conversion. And then I went out and got my own school bus and kind of used your idea of like the loft bed in it. And then now this past summer, like shuttling you and picking us up in the bus from base jumps, it was pretty cool, like full circle moment. It's pretty sick. But
full circle moment.
Yeah, I always loved your videos. You're kind of like the one who, watching those videos, I thought to myself, like, I could make videos of the stuff I'm doing. Like, you had a very laid back way of like making vlogs with your friends and things. So it was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about sharing the experiences and stuff. And like, I mainly started making videos just because like I have a terrible memory. So I just wanted to like go relive those moments, filming everything, looking back on it. I'm glad like it inspired people like you to pursue a similar path, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, for sure. So when you finally got to the point of it was time to get into base, did you have kind of idols and mentors at the very start? Or I know you said that when you first started out, like your brand there, Exile, you were doing a lot of things that might have got you kind of exiled from the community. Is you think like that's kind of the only way you had to do it, like coming from the place you were at? Or did you feel like you were like kind of alone at the start, or did you have people that were mentoring you and idols?
Yeah, I mean, that's like the whole name of Exile. We can go into that later, but my entry into base was not a very standard entry, nor was it a good one, nor would I recommend going the path that I took. But at the time, it was a lot more difficult to get into base jumping than it is now. Now it's very accessible. Like pretty much anybody can just like, do some skydives and go to a course and learn to base jump. But courses were available back when I started, but they were very exclusive and they were very difficult to get into. And I also personally was really not into skydiving. I didn't really like skydiving that much. And at the time also, the other skydivers at the drop zone, like if they found out that you were skydiving to base jump, they don't like that. They didn't like that at all. And they would like ostracize you and they would push you away. And because of that, because everybody knew I wanted to base jump, the skydivers weren't very friendly, nor were any of the base jumpers at the drop zone. So really, I was alone and on my own and just doing things without any guidance at all or any supervision from the start, which got me into some trouble and definitely ruined my reputation in the base community. And a lot of people were talking shit. A lot of people hated on me. And for good reason. Looking back, like I would have hated me too if I was one of them. But from my perspective, it was just like I was just outcast and like nobody wanted anything to do with me. So I was like, I was fucking going to do it anyway, with them or without them. And so that's what I did. Granted, things have changed a lot since then.
Yeah, you feel like
Hi, Chris.
Yeah, you're good. You can say whatever. You feel like finally that's kind of taken some years to come back, but I know even when we're at the bridge and everything, you're a very well-respected person. And like you told us, you can go basically any country around the world and there'll be people who will be willing to take you out jumping and stuff. So do you think a lot of that comes from the person that you've grown into, or does some of that come with the online presence, like being a big name in the sport? Or
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I'd like to think overall I'm pretty well respected by now, and it took a lot of time and a lot of like patience to do so. Granted, there's still haters. Everyone has haters that will just never turn. But most of them don't know me personally. They just see me online and they're like, well, we don't like this guy. So it's like there's that aspect of it. But I don't think the online presence really has anything to do with people like willing to take me around and show me their local spots and take me on jumps and stuff. If anything, that probably inhibits people wanting to show me around because sometimes people want to keep their spots secret and low key. And they know that I'll respect that too. And I've been to a lot of cities where people are like, yeah, we'll show you some buildings. We'll take you here. We'll take you there. But I agree with them. I won't post what they don't want me to post. I won't film what they don't want me to film. And so I guess that reputation is probably out and about now. And people are like, all right, cool. He's not just in it to film stuff and post it online. Like I do it because I love it. And it's my passion. I like to share that with people, but that's not why I do it. So if I can't share certain things, I'm totally fine with that. And I think a lot of jumpers see that and they respect it. Now, if I was just like blowing up everything online and sharing everything, people aren't going to want to, take me to the local spots and show me the jumps. That being said, it's like walking on eggshells with the base community. Sometimes it's really hard to like navigate with what's acceptable and what is going to potentially make an object harder for the locals to jump and potentially make your name, drag your name through the mud. So you have to just tread carefully. And I think at the end of the day, if you do it out of love and out of passion, not very many people will get mad at what you're doing.
Yeah, that's fair. I know, like, talking about not many people know you or whatever, it's cool. Like, whenever you meet, let's say an idol or something, you never know how they'll be in person. And with you, it's like the opposite. You're even like cooler in person than I could have imagined. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, even with traveling and going to new places, things like that. I think kind of like we know some people who post whatever online and it does kind of ruin the jumps, like burning an object, things like that. I ran to that this summer, a good one that you said to go to, and then I got there and things had changed on it and it wasn't able to jump anymore. So I can see how that can make people upset at you in the community, especially if people know who's the one that's doing it. So I didn't realize all that ethics side of base until you kind of talked about it in our course and things, but it's a big part.
Yeah, the ethics in base get overlooked a lot, and I will say, like, social media has totally, in my opinion, kind of ruined base jumping. I got the very tail end of the golden age of base jumping, in my opinion, like 2017, 18. That's like, it was sick. And then when social media started kind of like blowing up, like spots and base jumping got more popular, more people frequented spots, and it just created more restrictions and rules, and more deaths and fatalities created more problems. So like back when I first started, you could show up like pretty much anywhere and jump a lot of objects, and people wouldn't even know what base jumping is, and you could just get away with doing whatever you wanted. Because, you know, let's say a pedestrian sees you jumping, they're like, what's this? Like, for example, I was in Philadelphia, we did a jump. My buddy landed, I landed, the cops chased him through the street, caught him, and he told the cops that he was doing a skydive and landed off, and they believed it. And that was like 2018, right? If you tried to do that now, like, I guarantee you every police officer knows what base jumping is. They're not stupid. But at the time, it was so like novel, and especially in Philadelphia, there wasn't any active jumpers except for me, my buddy Badare, and we could get away with shit like that. But now, not the case. So, yeah, it's a blessing and a curse, social media. You know, it's cool, but it's also like, yeah, it's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it for sure. It definitely, I remember in our course, you said never do a jump like just for the video or for the film and things like that. And I know part of when we're in our course, and we can talk a bit more about that in a bit, but I always liked how you'd give like a real world experience type of thing instead of like a hard facts. This is the way to do things. Only by these are the rules or this or that. You give like a real world firsthand scenario look at things. I remember an example of that is we were on the bridge and a cyclist was coming by behind us, and you were teaching us something like we're geared up, ready to jump. And I was just like, oh, you know, like you're saying something like, oh, chase the guys coming. You're like, don't give a fuck about the cyclist. Like you could die doing what you're doing, like dial it in. And that was the first time you got like kind of like fired up like that. And I was like, oh, like it is important. You need to like dial it in and like not matter about other stuff. So it's cool to see just kind of the
most traumatic. Don't get distracted.
The complacency side of things. You don't want that to come in. So that was really cool to see.
Yeah, I like to give like reasons why. Like I don't like to say rules and be like you shouldn't do this. I like to you shouldn't do this. I did this and this is why I don't do it anymore because this is what's going to happen. So that's kind of like instead of just like cut and dry, no, don't do it, like an explanation and that sort of thing. So I'm glad you remember that key moment there. Just like it's a good learning lesson. Don't let the cyclist distract you from forgetting to gear check your friend, and then you miss something critical and something bad happens because you were worried about like a bicyclist riding by. It's just little things like that.
Yeah. So when you were getting into base and you were getting your numbers up and stuff, kind of when I'm sure that your cliff jumping career, things like that, really helped because even in the base community, you're an aerialist, you do wingsuiting, you do like all the kind of different aspects of it. When did you kind of feel like you started to gain confidence and start to kind of make these bigger trips around the world and meet new people as opposed to just doing kind of like training stuff off a bridge or things like that?
Well, I would say like my progression, the way I did things is not really a good example of like a standard progression or what anybody should do. I had confidence pretty early on, like probably too much ambition. Like my ambition was definitely greater than my experience and my ability level. But I will say, like coming from an extreme sports background, snowboarding, motocross, cliff diving, like you progress a lot quicker and you're a lot more comfortable earlier on in the base environment because one, you're used to like high stress scenarios where you have to perform well under pressure, and two, you have like very good body awareness, aerial awareness, and just like spatial awareness in general. Like you can get away with progressing a little faster when you have that background. Now, if I was just like a desk jockey at an office and I hadn't played any sports, I never did any extreme sports or anything athletic in my life, and then I went to base jumping, it's going to take me a lot longer to feel comfortable and confident. And that's like with my students, especially when I'm like kind of interviewing people before I accept them into the course, I really dig into their, past experiences. Like I really like extreme sports athletes. Just because they just do so much better. They're overall a safer base jumper at the end of the day because they perform so much better. And with you being like an ultra endurance athlete, technically is your title. With that being said, like, yeah, you progressed really quick too, because you're used to like mentally pushing yourself as far as you can go, and mental strength and base paired with athleticism is like the golden ticket to being a good base jumper. But to answer your question, my progression wasn't super solid. Like I went to the bridge, I went straight to Europe, I went straight off of terminal cliffs, tracking, flips, everything. And then right from Europe, I came back. I did this sick building. My first ever building was solo, like in a very big city that I'm not going to mention because it's very not allowed to jump there. But I was just like a loose cannon in the other base jumping community's eyes. They just thought that I was setting myself up for failure, that I was going to die. They were actually taking bets on how long I was going to survive. I mean, a lot of those guys I've out-survived. So it's shitty. It's like a shitty reality, but that's the thing. I think that's why people respect it now, is because like I haven't died yet. If you die, you fail. That's the worst you can do in the sport of base, is dying, for the community, for yourself, for your friends and family. So survive. That's the key.
Yeah. I remember when I was getting into skydiving, I was at Z Hills in Florida there, and I was getting tracking lessons done with Avalon Wolf. Nice. And he said that he was doing some wingsuit stuff with you. And then like a week or two later, he saw you doing like a backflip in a wingsuit off a cliff, and he was like, "What the hell? Like, this guy's progressing crazy."
That was my wingsuit progression was not a smart one. I did a good amount of wingsuit skydives at Z Hills, and then I went straight to Brazil, and then like my 7th wingsuit base jump ever, I was like doing a gainer, and then my 8th, I did a front flip, botched the front flip, and then I just kept doing the front flips until I nailed it. But each time I tried the front flip, I was like almost going in, like just almost over rotating into the cliff face. And then this proxy flying right away, which was absolutely so dumb. And it's a miracle that I survived that. And I think it is it's kind of shitty to like that I've documented that and people see that and they think that's like, oh, that's how we do it. That's how we get into base jumping. That is not the case. Cause like, I would say like 90% of people, if they did that progression, they would die so quickly. But I mean, definitely I've gotten lucky. I have a little bit of skill to back it up, but it's definitely luck, and luck goes a long way. But people at home and people listening shouldn't be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do a couple skydives. I'm going to go base jump at the bridge a couple times, take a course, and then go straight to Moab and do like quad gainers off of Tombstone, which is not how you do it. Just because I did it doesn't mean that it should be repeated or, can be repeated many times over and over. It's not sustainable.
Yeah. Well, you preach a lot of that in our courses. And I think too, with like you were talking about the background of thing, I think that does come into play a lot. And people ask me like who are outside of base, like I'm very, very new in base, obviously, but to other people who don't do it, it's crazy and things like that. But I find that the same way you prepare for a base jump or how you can go about looking through your fears and getting over those fears can relate to like anything you do in life. Like the preparation I had for doing some base jumps is kind of the same mindset I took even before my Hawaii swim. I went across that channel where I got stung by a jellyfish, and it's like you can easily die in there too, and it's not up to you with sharks and things like that. But how you prepare mentally, I'd like to like pick and pull, I call it, from like base jumping preparation to ultra and then ultra back to base, it's pretty cool that way. So I think like I hold base jumpers in a really high regard as far as like competency to be able to do like have the skills to navigate yourself off these like crazy objects and down and like do it all safely. I think it's pretty cool to see how you can move yourself from one spot in space to another and like do it safely. So I've always held base jumpers in really high regard that way.
Yeah, it's funny though, because you were saying like I was your idol at one point and all this. But a lot, like to the average person, they look at me and I'm like crazy, but like I might be a little crazy, but then I look at you swimming 72 hours straight, getting stung by jellyfish and freezing cold water, not sleeping, just like doing crazy runs. Like that stuff to me is mind blowing. And I can't even wrap my head around how a human can even achieve those things. And so I'm highly impressed with the stuff you do as well. So it's funny to see like, you know, what impresses you and what impresses me, you know?
Yeah, for sure. No, it is cool just to see like the paths in life and how that all works out. But yeah, you've always been a really big inspiration for sure. It's like I said, it's been cool and surreal to see. I remember that first day in our course when like we all got an Airbnb together and it finally came in, and like it was weird. It felt like I was like in a YouTube video or something, you know? It's just like I've seen so many hours of you, but yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, I'm just a normal guy, you know. It's like at the end of the day, I'm a human just like everybody else. So it's funny when people like get this huge, you know, I guess like idea of who I am or what I am, and then they meet me and they're like, oh yeah, he's just a normal guy, you know?
Yeah. No, it is really cool. I guess this is kind of like a more broad question, but like why do you think it's base for you, the thing that attracts you to base, like knowing there's a high risk or reward, and even in the thing that we've been talking about, like a future endeavor I'm planning on doing right now. And you were saying like, oh man, that's crazy. And you could die doing that, but you can also die with base. And I feel like base kind of has like a negative connotation around it because of the legalities of some of the objects and things like that. But like, why do you think for you it's base that you're attracted to? And is the why the risk / reward of that?
Oh, there's a ton of different dimensions and aspects of why I like base as much as I do. It's, I mean, a lot of it pretty much boils down to like the freedom aspect of it. Just, you know, you don't need anybody's approval or permission. On a lot of these jumps, you just rock up to a mountain somewhere, climb the mountain, you're in nature, you're pushing your body to get to the exit point, and then it's up to you to survive, and it's up to all the stuff that you've learned and trained for to survive, and nobody else is responsible for that except for you. And I think it's this like, it's kind of putting a lot of emphasis on like, how self-sufficient are you? And I like self-sufficiency a lot. And I like comfort breeds complacency. It kind of goes towards that. Whereas like when you're comfortable, you know, you're not really progressing. It's not rewarding to just sit in one spot and be stagnant. For me, it's boring, and life is boring in that sense. So base jumping kind of opens that door of like, how hard can I push myself physically, mentally, and with the very low margins of error, it just adds like just that much more like pressure. And I like pressure. I do well under pressure, and I just excel with pressure. So all of those factors combined, I think it's just like the most rewarding thing to pull something off, especially when it goes really in depth for like not just a standard jump, but like a big mission, a very hard, difficult climb with a technical jump, a technical LZ, and then a technical exit to like get back to your car. And just the whole mission is just like, there's so many things that can go wrong throughout, and you have to just nail it. And you're by yourself in the wilderness, and that shit is like my favorite.
Yeah, I remember like one of my other big idols was Shane McConkey, and I remember him talking about that, how it's like when there's a margin for error and like you don't know if you can do it, but you think you can, and then you take that leap of faith and you get it done. It's like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
And yeah, the world really does kind of become your playground when we get the freedom aspect like you're talking about.
And that kind of goes like back to the cliff jumping days. Why I loved the cliff jumping as much as I did at the time, you know, there was like 2 or 3 people that had jumped like over 100 feet. There was like a couple videos on YouTube, like straight jumps. at like 110 feet or so. And pretty much all those guys would get hurt. So in my mind, the reward for me was like, where is the boundary? Where's the limit of how high I can jump from? And that's why I did what I did, because I wanted to find that. I wanted to find that personally for me, not knowing what they were. And now, like, let's say if I'm starting to cliff jump now and I know the limits are like, where they are, I don't think I would have pushed as hard as I did or would have even gotten nearly as far as I did, because I don't like doing stuff that people have already done, really. I like to find out new things and like progress. And that to me is the most rewarding. And that's why like I kind of walked away from cliff jumping, because I felt like I maxed out what I could do in cliff jumping. And now with base, it's like such an endless, book. It's like an open door. You can just push it pretty much as far as you want. Granted, the more deep you get into the sport, the more risks you're taking, and then obviously the lower margin. So now I'm kind of almost feeling like I'm maxed out in base jumping, especially in wingsuit base jumping. I'm pretty maxed out. So now it's kind of like I'm trying to step back, focus on like teaching people, doing courses, the Exile stuff, like canopy production and all of that. Trying to like focus my energy still in the sport that I love, but like not regarding like my own personal boundaries and pushing that to the point where maybe I'll die doing it,
So like your goals have kind of shifted more from personal things to community based and everything like that. Exactly.
It's about the community. It's about the experiences with your friends and the people you're jumping with and that sort of thing. For me, more now than it was in the past. I just dip off by myself, go solo missions and do like super hardcore shit, because a lot of people wouldn't keep up or couldn't keep up. And if they tried, they could get hurt. And I didn't want to, even invite people to a lot of things. So I was doing a lot of solo shit. But now that I've done all of that, now it's like, now my focus is like, yeah, I want to jump with my friends. I want to experience that. I want to teach people,
Yeah, I know when we did some of the first jumps at the bridge, just like, I was so stoked. You could give you a hug at the bottom. It's like, I'm sure as like a coach, that's pretty like rewarding to see people coming in for the first time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's sick. It's like, it just gave me chills thinking about it, honestly. Just seeing like the thing that I love so much in life, and then like sharing that with somebody and they're doing it for the first time. And then they're like sharing that same joy and like excitement. And then it's like, I helped you get to that point, is like the best. It's like super rewarding.
Yeah.
And also scary and stressful, let me tell you.
Yeah. No, I bet taking people on is definitely, it's a different level of maybe responsibility feeling. But with the kind of jumping you did, you raged pretty hard and you'd push limits through, like I said, all different disciplines of base jumping. Do you think that there's a certain kind of like characteristic, or is it like previous experiences in life that bring those kind of jumpers, as opposed to somebody who might just get a fix out of doing like PCAs off the bridge in Twin Falls, which is all legal, like relatively pretty safe. Your campy's open right away compared to going through like Uli's Hole when you're wingsuit flying, stuff like that, like what do you think makes like a rager like that? Is it life traumas? Is it previous experiences? Or
no, I think that's a great question. I think if you took like an average person off the street and like you PCA'd them off a bridge, that'd be like the coolest shit they've ever done in their life. Nothing would ever compare to that. Well, I think everything kind of goes back to like how much you've experienced and your exposure to danger and your exposure to like exciting circumstances. And like, obviously it's like anything, like the more you're exposed, and you're going to be hated, accustomed you become to those things like fear and danger and all that. And I think for me, it's just been like since the very beginning, just always doing, crazy shit, whether it was on my dirt bike, snowboard, whatever. And I think just like a lifetime of that has like made me more, cool, calm, and collected to base jump. But I mean, the psychological aspect of that is like, I think most base jumpers are traumatized from one thing or another, whether it's like childhood trauma, like religious trauma, like who knows what it might be. But I don't think most base jumpers are like very mentally healthy or sane people. At the majority, there are totally normal people that base jump, and those people are great and they're very, chill, and they're very modest with their jumps, and that's good. But I think there's also like the very other end of the spectrum, people like me who are just like balls to the wall. I fucking have tons of shit that has happened in my past traumas and shit. This is just my way of expressing myself and like feeling something, I suppose. Otherwise it's just like life is just fucking boring and dull and just unfulfilling, really.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's kind of the dark side of base is like the trauma aspect and like potentially like the chasing the dopamine hit, the fucking high, or whatever you might consider it to be. I think a lot of base jumpers are like, they have a somewhat of an addict mentality at the end of the day. That's going to be a controversial thing for me to say, but I would say that it is the case. I think it does draw a lot of interesting characters to the sport. And that's why I click with a lot of them, because we're all the same, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think it's like a big trauma response of like a lot of base jumpers that have gotten into the sport to like, I don't know, for whatever reason it might be? There's tons of different reasons, but.
Yeah, I think there's all different things, like you said. I think also a big part could be community, like you said, finding people who
totally
are like-minded. I know being at like the bridge during I think it's Memorial Day weekend when we did our course, and it's like a bunch of jumpers out there. It was a 22 jumps thing was going on, so you got to meet like a ton of people.
Yeah.
Or even at Bridge Day, things like that. You get to be around a lot of people who might not like in normal life, people look at you and say, oh, that's crazy or whatever. But in base, you're just another person, right? It's not like you're standing out. You're not weird. You're just another person. And I like that quote is like, for those who understand, no explanation is necessary. And for those who don't, no explanation is possible. It's kind of like, it's hard to explain to people why you do something like that. They think you have a death wish or all that. But no, I think it is based on previous experiences. And for me anyways, it's striving to progress. But I definitely I've never been super like wanting to get into wingsuit stuff. Like specifically, I've never even done wingsuit skydive. So for me, I kind of think I have certain ideas of what I want to do in the sport, and I want to like hold myself accountable to that and not push it too hard, especially if I'm pushing it in other aspects of life where I could be in other danger. Like your luck can run out eventually, so
totally.
But I think it's different for everybody. But I think doing something that truly brings you happiness in the moment. And what I like about it too is nothing else matters except the task at hand while you're doing it, because if you do it wrong, that's the last thing you do, right? So something that fully encapsulates you and makes you present in the moment, it kind of just lets you forget about everything else you might be dealing with, your bills, your whatever relationships, anything like that, right? It's just whatever you're doing right now is all that matters. So I think that's really cool to me. It puts you like in the moment, makes you very present focused. So
that's another reason. That's like another big reason for me is because I can't sit still for long. I can't just like sit in my own thoughts for very long. So like base jumping is like a form of meditation, because like the definition of meditation is probably like focusing your mind only on one thing and being present for that one thing, right? So I can't just like sit here and like meditate. Absolutely not. But like when you're on an exit point and you're like fully in that moment, especially in a wingsuit jump, like when I push off and I'm flying, that's like the ultimate form of meditation for me. And it's the only way I'll get my mind as quiet as that moment. Nothing else will get it to that point. So that's probably another reason a lot of people are into it as well. And I know you have to probably get into that same mode of focus and the same mental state. Like when you do like these super ultra long swims and runs and stuff, like you got to just shut your brain off, right? You can't be like, thinking about how shitty this is and how much pain you're in, You just got to focus on just the task at hand, like what you're doing.
Yeah. Especially with swimming, I find like everything else, running, cycling, like you can look at things are moving and changing pretty quick. Like you're running through space or moving. Swimming, it's very like sensory deprivation.
Yeah.
It's just looking down at whatever green or black and darkness. And you really like, especially when I was swimming in the ocean, at the very start, I was thinking about what if a shark came up, like I was imagining it biting me, but it's like, you got like 15 hours of this, like you're going to paralyze yourself if you just keep thinking about that, right? You kind of have to accept and make peace of your current situation. And then you'll gain the ability to identify like gratitudes, be like, okay, I got to put that on my mind, but like at least my nutrition's going well, like I'm making good pace, like the waves are with me, or like you can always find something to be grateful about, right? So Yeah, but it definitely does. You get into some zones where
mental strength.
it feels like, yeah, you don't even remember the past hour or 2 hours of swimming, and then you put your head up and you've gone X amount of distance. So yeah, it's cool that way.
You got to control the fears. That's for sure. Like if you let fear take over, and especially anxiety and stuff in moments, like it can kill you if you let that happen, which is like, it's a weird paradox because the fear is there to keep you alive and keep you safe. But if you let it like overpower your like ability to think straight and make wise decisions, it can actually like result in your death. So it's like, it's a weird paradox. And base jumping has taught me that more so than anything else could. I had a gnarly experience. Like one of my last wingsuit base jumps was a super fucking gnarly, eye-opening experience where it was like I had to just control my fear in my brain, and like I had to push through it, and I had to make wise decisions, not out of fear or out of like pressure. I just had to make like logical decisions to make my life last longer. And in that moment, I was just like freaking out. You know, that shit was intense.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet.
It was did you see, I posted like a quick story about the lightning. I got stuck on this mountain.
Yeah, no, I saw your hair was standing up on your head.
Yeah. Yeah. Almost got struck by lightning. Couldn't like climb back up to climb back down the mountain because I was on the bottom of this cliff. The rocks were soaked. I free soloed down this rock face, like 60, 70 feet. Couldn't climb back up. Couldn't jump because it was too windy and wet. And then almost got struck by lightning. And then I was just hiding under this rock for like 2 hours, just like having a panic attack, thinking like, am I going to stay out here overnight? I could just ball up and be scared and freeze literally freeze to death that night because it's going to drop below freezing. I have no gear. Or I can like make a decision, make a plan, and try to execute that plan to survive, which is what I did. But it was really hard for me to like, all right, I'm going to leave this safe rock that I'm hiding under, and I'm going to fucking go and try to survive because this is my only option. And I had to do so with like clear thoughts. I couldn't like let that anxiety override everything, which was scary.
Yeah. But again, like your decision making and being able to have all those previous experiences of thinking in the moment, thinking fast, it makes you logical headed, right? It's like, I know like Alex Honnold would talk about when he's climbing and you do these things, like the hardest thing you've done is the hardest thing you've done, right? So if he does something that's super out there and dangerous, and then he gets a flat tire in his car, it's like, that's not a big deal. Whereas that could be the worst thing that's ever happened to somebody else, right? So it's like whatever you've done, you kind of gain perspective on the actual dangerous things in life and what can actually affect you. But I've seen some posts you had online.
Definitely. It's an exposure.
Some posts you had online about when somebody does pass away in the sport and you thinking about or saying that you'd think about just throwing your wingsuit away and walking away for good. Do you think this is something that you will do for your whole life, or do you think that at some point you will walk away? I know you said that you thought if you had a kid in the future, you'd probably hang the wingsuit up, but would you still base jump, or like, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, I think I'll always base jump. I think base jumping as just a sport, I think it's sustainable depending on your personality type and your decision-making skills and, just like how mature you are. That being said, accidents do happen, but I think wingsuiting is a whole nother level. It's a whole different discipline, and the exposure to risk is just so much more exponentially increased. Like the time of exposure in wingsuit base is like 20x versus a regular base jump where you're jumping, you're free falling for 3 seconds, you're under canopy and you're landing 20 seconds later. Whereas in a wingsuit, you might be flying, underneath tree branches for 2 minutes straight, like right off the deck. And just the exposure thing, like you have to make wise decisions, whether like the risk is worth the reward and how much exposure you're willing to take in that danger zone. Right. And for me, wingsuiting is kind of exceeded that risk versus reward ratio that I want to be in. And for me, I don't think I will wingsuit for very much longer. I think even after that one incident I told you about with the lightning strike, that was in September, and now we're in January. I've only done one wingsuit base jump since that day, and it was an insane building jump that I just couldn't pass up. It was like a novelty thing. and I just wanted to do it, right? But I'm not going to go out and chase wingsuit base jumps anymore because it's probably equivalent to, you know, giving heroin to a heroin addict or some shit like that. You know, it's not a great metaphor, but in the same sense, it's not sustainable in my opinion at the level that I'm on. Whereas slider down base jumping, I feel like you really have to fuck up very bad to go in or die slider down base jumping most of the time. Granted, like I said, there are these anomalies that do happen and people get unlucky, but I think, having a kid, that'd be 100% I'm quitting wingsuit base. I want to quit wingsuit base right now, but I haven't really been able to, you know. I still keep that wingsuit laying in the closet just for, you know, whenever I'm feeling like I need to go do a jump. But I'm really trying to step back and not like jump all the time or push, you know, the boundaries of the sport and try to open new exits and do sketchy exits. I'm just trying to like be conservative and trying to enjoy the basics of base jumping, not like having to push myself to feel that reward, you know?
Yeah.
Do not tell me this ran out of internet again.
Oh, I can kind of hear you now.
God damn it. Give me 1 second. I'm going to check this internet.
Chase is in the middle of Montana, so his internet is not the greatest right now.
All right, cool.
I can hear you.
I think it's just lagging.
Yeah, I was lagging, but I got you.
That was a good question. Good question.
Yeah. Do you think with base it's kind of like, I know some people do it as hobby or sport. Do you think to be successful long term you kind of have to live it, like be fully encapsulated in it, or do you think there's ways to do it just as a sport or a hobby kind of, or?
Yeah, it's like a lifestyle really, in my opinion. Like it's a lifestyle for me. It's really hard for people that are just doing it casually to ever, one, be safe, and two, like be proficient enough to be safe and like push themselves. Because in base jumping, it's in my opinion that there's a couple different zones. I would say there's two main danger zones. One is being uncurrent, and the other one is being hypercurrent. So when you're uncurrent, you know, you haven't base jumped in a while because, you know, you have a job and you have an actual life of other stuff that you're focusing on, and you're only jumping once every couple of months. You go do this jump and like you're rusty and you're scared. You're extra scared because you're not confident because you haven't done this in a while. Everything's kind of like, you know, it's kind of just overwhelming, right? So that's a danger zone. And to stay current, you have to constantly be jumping, right? And then there's hypercurrency, which is a place that I know very well. And that's because I jump all the time. And like, let's say I'm going to a trip to Europe or something, and I'm there for 3 weeks. I'm jumping 2, 3, 4 times a day for 3 weeks straight. By the end of that trip, I am in the most dangerous position that I can be because I am so confident. I'm complacent. I'm hypercurrent, really. And because I'm so overly confident, I'm taking more risks and thinking that I can get away with these excess risks because my fear level is almost non-existent at that point because I've done so much consecutively for so long that now that's asking for something to go wrong. So I would say it doesn't have to be a full-on lifestyle for you to be safe and successful in base jumping, but you definitely do have to commit a lot of time, and you do have to commit a large portion of your life to base, to stay current and to consistently jump and just stay in that safe zone because you don't want to be hypercurrent. You don't want to be uncurrent. It's really difficult. It's a fine line to dabble on, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. I guess it kind of depends on where you live and, like you said, the other things you have in your life. But
totally.
I remember you saying that before you go on like a trip or something like that, it's always a good idea even just to swing by the bridge in Twin Falls and like a place that's like legal and relatively safe and you know very well to kind of get the nerves back out and get the training in. So that was good advice for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like even very experienced base jumpers, like before they go to Moab for the turkey boogie or something, they'll, you know, swing by the bridge. They'll do a weekend or a week there and just get their legs back under them and, you know, get the nerves calmed for a bit. get current before you go and jump off of a cliff, where if something goes wrong and you're lagging behind to make a decision because you're scared or on current, that could kill you. So yeah, it's really important just to like, be aware of that in yourself. Everybody's different. And self-awareness is really important in base jumping.
Yeah. Well, that all makes sense. Kind of moving on now. I know you have a massive YouTube channel, over 1 million subscribers. But you said you've stopped posting as much on there because of the demonetization aspect, just with the videos you make of wingsuiting, things like that. So you've gotten into now canopy company in Exile. So, did you want to just kind of talk about that transition and how you kind of got into what you're doing now and that?
Yeah. So the YouTube stuff is kind of like, there's kind of more than one reason. It wasn't just demonetization. Like the whole reason I posted videos in the first place wasn't for making money. It was just to share my experience and like look back on those memories. And it was really cool to see people being inspired and living vicariously through my experiences, and like it would bring people joy and happiness, which was sick. But then like I really did get burnt out from like constantly feeling like, how am I going to up my next video? Like how am I going to do better than my previous video? And it's like this constant battle of like, okay, now my focus isn't so much on the experience and having fun and pushing myself and progressing myself. Now it's, how am I going to make this video better to please 1 million people online, which at the end of the day is just impossible. You can't please everybody. And so when my videos started getting demonetized for dangerous acts and that sort of thing, when YouTube's whole policies have changed, that at that point, I was like the icing on the cake. That was like, all right, I need to totally just walk away from YouTube altogether. Because I was posting once a week, like every Sunday I was posting once a week, and imagine like every single week I had to come up with like something sick to do. Right. And I didn't like how it took away the purity of why I was doing it in the first place. And we even talked about this in our course, I think, with the, jumping with cameras, not jumping with cameras. Why are you really doing it? Are you doing it for the love of the sport? For the experience, or are you doing it to get validation offline? And I think all of us, we want to be validated in some aspect, whether it be from our friends or family, or that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, it's really shitty if you die trying to get a clip for some fucking views online. And I actually had a cliff strike and I almost died. And I was like thinking I was bleeding out at the bottom of this cliff. Like, this is the last moment I'm going to be alive. And I remember thinking, fuck everybody online, fuck YouTube, fuck social media. None of those people are going to care when I die. None of them give a shit about you at all. Like, they might be sad for a day, but they don't really care about your well-being. And that was like this weird realization I had as I was like laying on the ground, like I'm bleeding out. No one's coming to help me, yada, yada, yada. And that was like 2 years ago. And at that point, I stopped really filming a lot of my base jumps, and I stopped filming a lot of the adventures. I'll still like film some of the jumps, and I'll still film some of the stuff now. The time has passed a little bit, but it really made me realize like, yo, you can't be doing this stuff for anybody but yourself and like the people you're doing it with. Like, that's a fine line. So kind of getting off track here, but Exile, I love base jumping. Base jumping is my life. It's my passion. And I really wanted to like stay in the community and be involved in base and like innovate and come up with new things and just make a really fucking sick canopy that was unlike other canopies on the market, because one, I have a very specific jumping style and flying style, and I felt like I could do something to make a canopy specifically that's for that style of flying and jumping that would be something that people are going to like. And granted, when you're passionate about something, you want it to be your life. And Exile kind of evolved from that passion, that desire for base jumping to be something that is always going to be in my life,
Yeah, I remember you telling us about that accident you had, and I'm sure that's changed. Like, you've learned a lot, I'm sure, from an experience like that moving forward. And yeah,
oh yeah,
I guess at the end of the day, you really probably look at why you're doing it, and it really has to be about you internally, not for external reasons. And same with the stuff, a lot of stuff I do, it's, you have to have that internal motivation, and your reason why really has to be internal, right? You can't be doing it for other people. Like if you put your happiness in the hands of the audience, like you're always going to be doing stuff for the applause, right? So
Totally.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with Exile, I think it was really cool to see, even just when we're at our course, you were like changing some things, and you're like almost, I guess, became like learned engineering on your own, and like the CAD programs and everything like that. Like I'm sure that was a huge process to learn from scratch, because you didn't have a background kind of in that, did you?
No, not in engineering. And yeah, it started off, I mean, I can go into the backstory just briefly. Yeah, you know, I don't know how much I really want to go into like this, the reason why I kind of, it's called Exile for a reason, but it was a lot of brands and a lot of companies, like any of the base manufacturers, wanted nothing to do with me early on. And I was also like, come on, I want some gear. I want to like jump some shit. I can like promote gear, you know, like I do fun and cool base jumps, whatever. But like, I mean, I had one falling out with a specific manufacturer. And at the time I was just like, I need to make my own gear. So it was kind of like almost a spiteful thing at the same time, but it was also like a passion project. Cause like, I mean, there's a saying in skydiving, like, how do you get rich in the skydiving industry? Like, how do you make a large fortune? No, sorry. How do you make a small fortune in the skydiving industry? You start with a large fortune, right? So this was never like a thing to make money. You're never going to get rich off of base jumping. This was just like a passion thing for me. And that being said, it's come a long way, and I entered not knowing really much about manufacturing, much about like the CAD side of things. I've always had an engineering mind, and I've always liked creating and building new things. Like I built this whole house. I engineered the whole house, and I built this whole house by myself. So I taught myself a lot, you know, and everybody can learn shit. You don't have to go to a college to like get a degree to learn something. Like some of the most successful, innovative people are people that just, you know, had that natural ability and gift and desire and passion to meet their goals, and they did. So I'm very open-minded in that sense, and that's kind of like Exile was a pipe dream for sure. It was a pipe dream, and there was a ton of ups and downs, and there's so many different times throughout the process where I was going to quit. I wanted to quit. I needed to quit. And, you know, 5-6 years later, it's finally like at a place where I'm like super stoked on everything, the production quality, the design, the like just the overall canopy is sick. And I'm really excited with how far it came. And I never could have imagined that it would be where it's at today when I started it, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I know like a lot of our guys in our course and your students, and if you go to things like Bridge Day, you see lots of people are rocking Exile canopies and the Griffiths, and I'm going to be picking one up here soon, switching it out for my other canopy. But yeah, I think it's a pretty cool, and the business side of things, I'm sure you learned a lot from like running yourself as the business in YouTube, but now keeping that same kind of business sense, but switching it over to a product that's not you as much. I think that's it's pretty cool, and it's inspirational as entrepreneurship goes. And that was the same thing. I went to school for business marketing and stuff, and I haven't really used anything I learned in school. But when I got into, I have a boat rental company in the summer times, or rent surf boats out, and I learned more in like one summer of doing that business and setting up and getting clients and everything than you would in like 4 or 5 years of school, you know? So
yeah, it's crazy to see. Like what my most successful friend, he went to school but for something completely unrelated, and then he began like making products, like developing products. And now he has 2 different businesses developing these products, and he's so successful. But it's because he has like that engineering brain and like that creative brain. And then he took that and applied that without any like help from his degree or his schooling. Granted, you know, I didn't do this all on my own either. I had help from like aerospace engineers along the way and that sort of thing early on. And then it just turned into like, yo, I need to learn this shit on my own. Like I need to know how to do all this stuff and why things work the way they do, so I can then tweak and improve upon the product throughout the whole R&D process. Because if you're relying on a bunch of other people, like you're never going to get anything done. Like it was just too time consuming to just wait around for the engineers to like change this or work on this. So that's when I started like really taking on the project fully. And I've learned so much along the way. It's been crazy rewarding.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure just being the one that can probably test it out and understand the product the best is cool to be able to implement new things into the design and things like that, make changes on the fly when you're the tester and you're the person that designs it. So,
oh yeah, dude. Yeah. If you're the fact that I'm testing it myself too, it's like I can literally sew something up right here in my house, change something, and then I can go take it to a cliff that day. I can jump it, bring it back, alter something else, take it to the cliff the next day. And that's just basically how the Griffiths came to be, was like small tweaks and adjustments. It was like a lot of empirical knowledge, because it's really hard to model a 3D ram air parachute in the programs, because there's so many deformities with the airs and the wrinkles and everything. So we did do a lot of 3D modeling, but it's crazy to see, like, when you do 3D modeling, it tells you one thing. You take it to the real world, it does another thing. So with base, probably any canopy R&D, it's like a lot of real world experiments and a lot of real world testing, which was honestly so scary, because like you get this new canopy and this new prototype, and you're like, I should take it out of a plane, but I'm going to go take it off this cliff because this is what I have. I have this cliff right down the street. Almost all of the tests on all the prototypes were off this sketchy little static line cliff. It's super positive. It's definitely not a good testing cliff, but it's what I have, and that's what I trusted my canopies to perform on. And granted, some of them were shit, some of the prototypes were bad, and just slow improvements along the way. And now it's finally at a point where people are like loving the canopy. It just makes me stoked when people are like, "Yeah, I love this thing. It's so different than anything I've flown."
Yeah. No, that's unreal.
And that brings me to another point. Recently, I've been getting a little bit of pushback and a little bit of hate from who knows where, but people are like, "This dude, he's not even an aerospace engineer. Like, why the fuck would we jump his canopy? Like, he has no business making parachutes." But it's like, well, if the end product is sick, what does it matter what my background is? Like, what does it matter how I got to the point that I got if the end goal and end product is awesome, right? It's like, it's like the Wright brothers or something who like started flying, and they didn't have an aerospace background probably. I don't know what their background was, but flying wasn't even a thing. They just had this like pipe dream idea, and they were trying shit, and eventually now it evolved into aviation today. It's like, I don't know why people are hating upon the lack of my background when the end product is like a good one. It's better than a lot of people that have an engineering aerospace background,
Well, I think too, you're going to understand how a canopy works under the hundreds of hours you've had under canopy compared to somebody who's in an office designing online, right? You definitely need a bit of both of the side of it, but you're going to understand tweaks and things, and
totally,
like, if they've never jumped it before, they're not going to understand how a little adjustment will change something or this or that, right? So
totally,
that was a big thing, like why I'm getting one of your canopies. And I've had troubles with maybe some of the bigger brands. If something goes wrong, you can't even kind of get a hold of them, and like knowing you and being able to talk to you about, and all your students using them, like, to me, it's cool to be able to talk to you on, you're the one who makes the canopy and know how it works the best. So why would I not use something that you use and better than anybody, right? So to me, that's why I'm getting a Griffiths.
That's another good point. Yeah, like that brings me to another point. Like, I was in South Africa, and my one good buddy, he was test flying a speed wing for another company. Granted, he's just a pilot. He's not an engineer or anything. So he's strictly just test flying. But then to see the process of his feedback going to the engineers and then having to tweak stuff and then sending it back to him, like the back and forths, there's a lot of miscommunications, and you can't really communicate everything fully when you're doing that. So my advantage of like personally jumping it myself and then tweaking it and changing things myself definitely allowed me to like really fine tune the canopy. And at the same time, later in the production stages or the research and development stages, I was getting feedback from a lot of other jumpers for stuff they didn't like, stuff they did like, things that they wish that was different. And so I took like that feedback and I kind of made it to what it is now with all of that, you know, my own experiences and their experiences.
Nice. Do you have any other goals to get into things like containers and things like that? Or are you just going to be sticking with canopies for a while?
Yeah, I never really had a desire to do that sort of thing. I think because I don't think it's that challenging. I don't think it's hard to build a container. It's such a rudimentary design. It's just like a tray with 2 pins and a harness, and it's really easy to build a container. I could sew one up here. Granted, it would be shit if I sewed it myself, but it's not. It hasn't been on the list because I really want to get like, 1, the canopy very established, and 2, another model canopy established. I want it to be like, I want to put all my resources and time and efforts into making the parachutes as best they can be. Because I feel like if you put too many eggs in different baskets, then something's going to suffer, right? And I don't want the canopies to suffer. I want them to be the best they can be. Once they're where they need to be and everything is like moving along, it's like a machine just moving itself, then maybe I'll move on to containers, but that's nowhere in the near future. Like right now I'm prototyping another model canopy, and I'm also working on the Griffiths 2 and all of that stuff. So there's just no more time or resource to put into containers or wingsuits or anything like that. And I just don't want I don't want the main product to suffer. You know, I want the main product to get all the love and attention, so it's the very best.
No, that makes sense.
Can I hit some water real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hit me.
Yeah, so another part of Exile that you've gone into just this past year was the coaching part, and I was actually part of your first jump course at the bridge in Twin Falls. How did you get the idea that you wanted to start coaching, and how did that all become a thing?
Well, it was always like, it was kind of there in the back of my head for a while, but I didn't quite have, I would say, the experience like to do it yet. At the same time, yeah, it was just like an idea, and I didn't think I'd really like it, or I didn't really think it would be. I didn't know what I'd feel if I started teaching. So I did like a little bit of a trial last year. Was like a big trial run. So I didn't take on too many students, but originally I was doing a Brazil trip to wingsuit, and then I was like, maybe I'll just like, you know, throw it out there online. Like if anyone's interested, I'll do like, you know, a first tracking course, wingsuit course, like see who's interested. And I got so many people like DMing me and like people interested. So we did the Brazil course. It went really good. It was super fun. It was very stressful, and I really didn't make any money, but it was super fun. And after that, I was like, okay, at the same time, let's see how the FJCs will go. So I put a feeler out for that, and then got a ton of people reaching out like, yeah, we'd love to learn. And so there was actually too many people. And so I was like, you know, I don't want to commit to all these people and, you know, hate it or something. So I only did like 4 courses after the Brazil course, 4 FJCs. You were the first one. And then I just ended up like absolutely loving it. It's, like I said, it's an extremely rewarding thing to see other people like loving and just being excited about the sport that, you know, you're into and excited about, and teaching that and like sharing my knowledge is also just like very rewarding. And I think I have quite a interesting or like unique perspective on the sport, and also a unique like teaching method, just because of, you know, the way I learned and the way I do learn still today. And I just think that with a lot of, you know, traditional FJCs, you're trying to teach these base jumpers who do not do well sitting in a classroom. You know, you're trying to teach them in ways that they're not learning the best. So I try to, you know, teach people at a slow pace. I like to teach people like by doing and just stacking on information as we go slowly, not overloading them, not overwhelming them. And so that being said, it's just like, yeah, it's worked out really well, and I really enjoy the courses. And so that's kind of what it came to be. And now this summer and spring, I'm definitely, ramping up the classes. I have 6 in the spring, and then I haven't scheduled the fall classes yet, but definitely going to go hard on it this year.
Nice, dude. Yeah, I know for me, a big thing, when you posted that you're doing courses, I did my first jumps at Bridge Day last year. So like 2023, I guess, with Squatty Bob's, like the Bridge Day first jump course. And then I was so stoked on it. I was like, I don't want to wait till like next summer to do another course. And then when I saw yours pop up, it was in like February, you mentioned it or something. I was in Guatemala at the time.
Yeah.
I remember in the hostel, like messaging you on this little like shitty bed. And when you answered and we finally got to like saying I was going to be in it, I was so stoked. But I think a big part I liked about it is, like I said, you have so much real world experience, from urban stuff to wingsuit flying to big mountain stuff, like everything, right? You have so many actual experiences. Yeah. You've seen a lot in the sport. So a big part of like, you had actual curriculum throughout the course, but another part was like, as you talk about the curriculum stuff, you'd put in a real world experience and like little tips here, there, and here and there. And I remember just like, I took notes the whole time on my phone, have just like a base note of all those things you were talking about. And I think it's really cool.
Yeah. I'm glad you took notes.
All those real world experiences. And I think that was like a really good value that you might not get at other courses.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. Like, I do get like criticized for running courses, 'cause like I do push the boundaries. People think I'm sketchy at times and shit. But at the end of the day, I know survival. I know how to survive, and I've done that this long. I'm not invincible. I'm not claiming to be. I'm not saying I'm out of the woods yet, but I think I have a unique like knowledge base to teach people how not to die in base jumping, which I think is very important. And I don't think a lot of courses really go into that. I think a lot of FJCs are just trying to sugarcoat a fun experience. You know, let's go jump for a couple days, and like, this is your entry to base, and everything's, rainbows and butterflies. But then they're not really exposed to like, yo, you can die, and you're gonna die if you don't like listen, and you don't train, and you don't practice. So like, I try to like really drill into people's heads like the dangers and like how serious this is, And all that being said, like, yeah, you were my very first course ever, and things have each course I do, like, things get better and they improve. And like this coming season, I have a lot of changes I want to make just to make the courses better overall for everybody. And I think there's a lot of potential, but I'm even so, I'm really happy with how they all went so far, and no one's gotten hurt. Everyone's still alive. All my students are still alive. So that's good stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think, a cool part too is that you told me and some of the other guys or everybody in the course that if you're doing another course back there, feel free to like come by and jump in on that course and just jump and hear the lessons and things like that. So
yeah,
I think a big thing too is like any question I've had when I've been doing things solo or with other friends, other places, jumping, it's like, if I had a question, I would text you and you'd answer like immediately, right? Like it was nice to have like a mentor, especially when you're trying to navigate something that you're not sure exactly how to go as a beginner. So I think that was a really important part of the course and cool thing.
Yeah, it's important. It's like, it's important to have that. I've told you, like, you're welcome back at any other course for free, just to, get current again, shake the rust off. But also, like, you're always welcome to message, like, call me, text me, whenever you want. If you have a question, like, I'm all ears. And that being said, I've also helped you. Like, you were like, yo, I don't really know like who I can be mentored by up in Canada. And so then I linked you up with my good buddy who's up there and tried to like give you that direction. Whereas I won't do that to everybody. I say that I'll do it to everybody that is respectful of the sport and that it's listening to what I've taught them. Like, now I've had another student, for example, who, he was kind of breaking ethics. He jumped this building in the daytime when he shouldn't have done it. Like, we've gone over why you don't do these things, and he did it anyway. And then he went to a different city, and then he hit me up. He's like, yo, do you know any locals that I can link up with in this city? I'm like, yeah, I do. I know them, but I'm not going to connect you with them because you're being an asshole. And I do not want my name I don't want my reputation connected to you because you're disrespecting the sport, and none of my friends are going to show you love if you're going to be, holding yourself in this manner. So that's the thing on ethics, and like you were trying your very best. Like, granted, you're all new, so you don't know fully what's okay and what's not. But I've had you text me multiple times, like, "Hey, is it okay if I post this jump? If I film this jump?" And so you were cautious about what you were doing, and that's what's important. Is like you were trying. It wasn't like you were just going off and like saying "fuck you" to everybody and disrespecting the community. And that goes a long way. And that's why I linked you up with a potential mentor and friend of mine that I know is a reliable and experienced base jumper, full of knowledge. And that's what I would like to give that to all my students, but I would like all my students to, respect what I've taught them and respect the sport and the community. And as a result, then they will get the love from me at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. Definitely want to listen to somebody who's done it more than you and knows more. So, with students, you talked a bit about how you choose who came in based on like what they've done previous and the type of athletes and things you're looking for. In the actual course, you get some different type of people. Like in our course, even our friend Gabe came in as like a wing flyer. He wasn't a skydiver.
Speed flyer.
So he has, speed flyer. And he has a lot of like canopy time, but he doesn't have the free fall type experience. Whereas like skydivers might have more like free falling experience and pitching and things like that, but they don't have the actual canopy time as much. Like obviously it goes individual basis, but do you kind of coach an overall curriculum and then tweak it based on individual goals and what the individual you think is capable of, or how does that work in your mind?
Yeah. Gabe's a great example of that. Now, it's not very standard for FJCs to teach like paragliders and speed flyers. But personally, I love speed flyers. I love teaching them the base jump because they're just masters of canopies. Granted, with Gabe, he's a little crazy under canopy because he's used to flying a tiny wing like 2 feet off the deck going 100 miles an hour. But that being said, he knows how to fly a canopy, but there's pros and cons to everything, right? So like if you're only a skydiver, yes, you know how to free fall, you know how to fly your body in terminal air, and you know like with what to do with like parachute malfunctions and stuff. But you're not really taught weather, you're not taught mountain weather, you're not taught object assessments, that sort of thing. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, speed flyers, they don't know how to free fall. They don't know how to fly their body in terminal air, but they know how to assess mountain weather. They know how to like keep themselves alive in the mountain. A lot of things that are important in base. Now, the best thing that a student could be is a speed flyer paraglider / skydiver, right? But that's why I go really in depth now with like the interviews, more so than I did the first year. I'm really going deep into people's history and past and their like experiences. Because I want to feel out where they're coming from and what they're capable of. And someone like Gabe, who doesn't have any skydiving experience, but he's like a master speed flyer, I have to tell them, hey, listen, like you can do this FJC and you can jump slider down, but don't think you're going to go jump off a terminal cliff and be okay. Like you can't just go to Brento and think you're going to be able to fly your body in terminal air because you don't have that experience yet. Granted, it can be done. Like you can learn slider down base jumping, and then you can go do a bunch of tunnel time and learn how to fly, your body in air. And people have done that, and I think that's an acceptable way to do it. I don't think you have to be a skydiver to be a good base jumper. It's just a weird rule. Like you need 200 skydives to learn to base jump. It's such a weird traditional rule that has never been really questioned. Whereas, I'm not going to take you if you have like no skydives or no experience in other sports. But I feel, like I said, on an individual basis, I feel out the person if they're going to be safe and capable. And if they're going to progress, at a reasonable rate, then I will consider them as a student. And that being said, I'm sure you've seen throughout the course, I feel everybody out on an individual basis, and I kind of give them, the option of like, you can push it further, or you can stay at this. You can keep PCAing and you can keep practicing canopy skills, or you can move forward and start going handheld. And I'll kind of feel everybody, their comfort level and also ability level. And I'll kind of suggest things and work on things with them on an individual basis throughout the course. And as you've seen with Gabe, Like he never really got into the free fall because he was still trying to figure out, the base canopy and, the exit, the body position. Like that was all new to him. He's never pitched for a pilot, or he's never reached for a pilot chute in his life. Right. So I wasn't like, yo, you should definitely go stowed on this course. Like, no, you just take your time, just keep jumping at the bridge, doing handhelds, doing static lines. And then Gabe came back on a different course and he did some more jumps. And he's been really conservative ever since. But that's the stuff I'll go over. Like, hey, you can do it, but this is how you're going to have to do it. It's not going to be the standard progression at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I know even like with us in the course, if you're at a different point at a different place, I remember I tried, we were like at the end of the day and we were doing, an unpack jump, and I remember you saying like an option would be a Mary Floppins to try, and it's like not everybody on that jump did that. I think I was the only one on that jump to try it, but I remember you talking about like the place you're at and like your previous experiences and like having confidence in the moment at that time to try something, and even doing something like that, a different type of jump, and we worked obstacle avoidance and it puts you in a different position, and like it's good things to work on at the bridge where it's like a safer environment, right? So I think that was cool that it wasn't like a hard black and white, you all have to do this jump every single time, like this is exactly how it works. I think it's like cool that you're kind of flexible as far as working individually with each student, and that you don't have a course that's like 20 people, right? It's 4 or 5 people, so you have that individual time with you. So
yeah, and I'll like the Mary Floppins, for example, people gave me a lot of hate for that. But I mean, I went over with you before you did it. I said, yo, people aren't going to like this. This is not an entry beginner level unpack jump, but in my opinion, it's one of the safest because especially like if you have the right wind direction and stuff, you're falling backwards. Your canopy's out in front of you. There's no potential for you to fall into your canopy or gift wrap yourself like there is on a tard. If you slip off on a tard and you fall into it, and traditionally tards are like the first one people try, that's what they learn.
Yeah.
But it's just not my opinion that they're the safest. So at the same time, I'll give you the option, right? I'll say you can do these few things, you can choose, and this is why I would do this one over that one. And I'll push people to like, push themselves and scare themselves in a safe environment, like you were saying at the Prime. But I won't let anybody do anything inherently dangerous that I don't think they're capable of handling. But at the same time, you do need to like make yourself uncomfortable to an extent to better yourself in safety. And that's the goal, is safety at the end of the day. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I like to do everything individually. Like I like to feel everybody out,
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think? I know at some points online you've said you don't want people who weren't thinking about it already to get into base just because of you, things like that.
Yeah.
What advice would you have to people who are looking to get into base? Like people who, like you said, if they're on the fence about it, they probably shouldn't. But if they have like a desire and it's a goal they've had their whole life, what kind of goal or advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, if it's like a burning desire, like it's an absolute thing you want to do, then you should follow your heart in that sense. But like, yeah, I don't want to influence anybody. I don't want someone to see my videos and be like, I want to base jump someday, because you just see like the good shit online. You just see like, you just see all the pros. You don't see any of the cons. Like at the end of the day, it's such a brutal and just traumatic sport. Your friends die, you could die, you can get seriously injured, and there's a lot of like gruesome aspects of the sport that you don't see online. So I just encourage everybody to be aware of what you're dabbling with. Know the consequences, know like the gravity of what you're about to enter into, because for a lot of people that enter into base jumping, it's hard for them to ever leave. One, they get a taste of like the feeling of it, but they also get the taste of the community and like the deep richness that's involved in the community. Like I have some of my closest friends spread out throughout the world or, from base jumping, right? And you connect with those people on like a level that you can't connect with anybody else because you're risking your life with these people. And it's almost like a sense of trauma bonding. It's like this deep rooted, like closeness that you feel with these people. And then you lose those people and they die in front of you, or, maybe not. Maybe they get super fucked up and injured and then they leave the sport. And then That also hurts, but it's the most beautiful thing in the world, but it's also like the most traumatic thing in the world. So before anybody gets into base, just know what you're going to potentially walk yourself into, and you have to be accepting of your own death, and also the death of your potential new friends that you're going to make.
Yeah, well, I definitely know that with even the guys on our course. It feels like after a week with them, you've known them for years, right? And you have these deep connections, and it's like almost like a spiritual type of thing. It's hard to explain, but yeah, it is good to know all sides of it, right? Like have everything in front of you and make a decision based on that.
Yeah.
I think also getting into base for me personally was important to know like what I'm comfortable doing and what my goals are in the sport and what I'm looking to do with it. And if I don't feel comfortable doing something, to walk away and to know like, okay, I'm not going to be swindled or influenced by anybody else. It's like me, and you kind of have to be strong in that sense, right? But I like about base jumping is nobody's really, it's not like people are bullying you to do things you're not comfortable with, or like you actually get respect if you back down from something, right? No base jumper is going to chirp you for backing down from something you're not comfortable with if it means saving your life, right?
Yeah, exactly. You get more respect from walking off of objects than, being reckless and pushing things and saying like, fuck it, I'm going to jump anyway. It's quite the opposite, because none of your friends want to see you get hurt. None of the community wants to see you get hurt. They want to see you being safe and like conservative. And that goes a lot further in base jumping than just rocking up and like just charging really hard. Nobody likes the people that rock up and charge hard, because nobody wants to watch someone die. Like that's the end of the day. They're not going to invite you on jumps because they don't want to watch you die,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's for sure. One thing that I thought's pretty cool, like how invested you are in your students, is you got all of our names tattooed on your back, all of your students so far, which is pretty cool, I thought. So that was pretty funny to see that photo one day pop up in a text. But
yeah, dude, I hope by the end of this summer, hopefully it's going to be an entire back piece of people's names. Which was funny because I was texting you yesterday and I was like, how do you spell your last name? And I was like, oh yeah, I could have just looked in the mirror. It's like on my back. it was funny.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. It's commitment right there.
Yeah. And I guess just to kind of end on a brighter note, what do you think gives you the most pride in the sport now? Is it looking back at the jumps you've done or the lines you've opened? Is it kind of the Exile and building the canopies? Is it coaching new people? Is it doing things like this, giving people information? What is kind of gives you the most pride and excitement at this point?
So there's two things that really like jump out at me. I'll start with the Exile stuff. It's like when I see someone choosing to jump a Griffiths, and not only that, but choosing to like use that canopy on super technical, sketchy jumps where they absolutely have to trust the canopy fully. Like that makes me so stoked, because I'm like, obviously I did something right. And for example, there's one jumper in Arizona who, came off of all of the other main, brand name canopies, and he recently got a Griffiths, and then he just started like charging gnarly exits, like opening new exits, jumping into cracks with the Griffiths. I'm like, you chose that canopy over all the other canopies that you still own. You chose that one because you like it, and I obviously did something right. And that to me is like, I did it. I did something right. And that's exactly what I was hoping for when I started the company. And then another really rewarding thing is like the students, but not only just the students, but it's like Mayan. Do you know Mayan? I'm gonna give Mayan a shout out.
Yeah, I met him at Bridge Day. Yeah.
All right, so Mayan,
another Canadian guy.
Yeah, Canadian Mayan. He stayed at the bridge like a month after I ended the FJC with him. He stayed there. He kept jumping and jumping and jumping. He listened to my recommendation, like, yo, don't go jump any solid objects until you have like 75 or 100 base jumps at the bridge. He listened to that. He met a lot of people at the bridge by staying there. He made a lot of friends. He made a lot of connections, and he built his skills and his ability levels really well. And then I saw him in Moab this season, and by then he had, his base number, all of his objects. something like, I don't know, maybe 150 base jumps. But the cool thing that got even cooler was not only did he listen and he progressed really nice and slow and wisely, but he had a really like respectable mentor that was showing him the ropes and all of that. But then he came and was on a river trip with a bunch of my old school homies, like people that have been around base jumping for like the last 5 or 10 years. They all went on a river trip, and it's like a really tight knit crew that have been around a long time. And then there was Mayan with him, the new base jumper that just did his FJC this spring, is out rocking it up with these guys doing like a 5-day river float, opening new exits, jumping all this shit. And they took him in and they loved him. And that was just so cool to be like, yeah, Mayan went about things like respectfully. And as a result, people saw that and took him into the community lovingly with open arms. And like, to me, I was like, holy shit, full circle. Amazing. It just like made me so fucking happy to see him come off the river. All my friends there, all smiling. Everyone's giving each other hugs. And then there's Mayan, like just absolutely pumped. I'm like, dude, you don't even realize how lucky you got your first season of base jump to go and do from the start. This is insane.
No, that is really cool.
Blew my mind.
Yeah, no, that is unreal. Yeah, it's a really cool community. That's one thing I've learned right away. It was like, it's very welcoming and like-minded people. It's definitely one of the best parts. So
yeah, for the most part, there's like, there's bad apples throughout any community, but for the most part, it's a very beautiful community, and it's a very sensitive one too. So you like, you get love if you give it, but if you disrespect the community, you're very quickly going to be, disrespected back by everyone, and you're going to be hated. So you got to be careful.
Yeah, for sure. Just in ending here, I appreciate you for coming on and talking, and it's been a privilege to get to learn from you and call you a friend. So yeah, thank you for coming on.
Absolutely, dude. I really appreciate the time. This is like my first real podcast, so I'm excited to see how it turns out. And I think we went over a lot of good stuff. So real cool perspective. And I guess anybody out there listening who wants to potentially do an FJC or buy a canopy, check out exilebase.com for all of the information.
Yeah, for sure. And then Adrenaline Diction and Exile Base on Instagram, right? 2 accounts. So
definitely. And if anybody's trying to reach out, like if they just DM Exile Base's account, that's probably the best way, or just emailing Exile Base, like info@exilebase.com. They can just email that and I'll see that really, really quick. So if anyone has questions, just reach out. If you're just starting the process of skydiving or speed flying or whatever, if you just want to know more information on like what to look for, what to practice, and how to get into it, feel free to reach out at any time.
Sweet. One last thing, I've been trying to get either family members or my friends to do a tandem skydive. Coming from somebody who's done everything in the sports, would you think it's a good idea for them to do a tandem at least once in their life?
No, definitely. I think everybody should skydive at least once. I think it's super safe overall statistically, and it's like a feeling like nothing else. So I think it's a good idea to get everybody up there and jump out of a plane.
There you have it. We'll get the boys up there at least once.
Sick, dude.
Right on. Well, that is episode 16, Comfort, Breeds, Complacency, Chase Reinford. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man. I'll catch you later, dude.
Yeah, keeping us bad.